All right, let's bring in our legal panel here to discuss the legal ramifications of shutting down Gitmo. Mayor Bartlett, attorney at the law offices of Mayor Bartlett PLLC and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office, and Mark Furnish, professor of Brooklyn Law, and he's argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll be talking about the Supreme Court in a little bit. Gitmo. I can make the compelling moral or practical argument that it's outlived its usefulness. Between the guys we chip out already, there were 600 that we started there with, or something approaching that, and we're down after it's all said and done to 46 guys that would come stateside. But Mayo, there seems to be, and my guest right before this echoed it, there's more questions than answers. Let's just hypothetically imagine Republicans would go along with this on the Hill, which will never happen. But let's say they did.
That's the elephant in the
room.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah. How are you going to figure out, wouldn't they get their day in court? Don't we have laws that say you can't move somebody from a foreign prison to a U.S. prison? I mean, aren't there certain hurdles that you can't just say, never mind?
There are, but we routinely say never mind. That's the issue. And that goes in terms of international laws, in terms of treaties, in terms of us not being signatories to the International Criminal Court. So there are a host of issues in terms of the legality that we're not scrutinizing right now.
But that works because we call them enemy combatants. But once you take somebody, and first of all, as I understand it, U.S. law bars the transfers of inmates to U.S. prisons. But if you do that, they're no longer enemy combatants.
No,
right? They're afforded due process, and then all of a sudden you open the doors to the courtroom, and then the questions of, well, what kind of evidence did you have to get these guys in the first place, and everything else that comes out. Wouldn't that be an inevitability of this?
Well, it should be, but there's been a constant rollback of civil liberties, and when you stop to look at the fact that our administration right now is suggesting that under the right circumstances, even an American citizen can be killed by an unmanned drone without having any due process, without being brought to court, this is following that trend. And you have individuals who have never been confronted with the evidence against them. They don't have an opportunity to challenge that information. Instead, they're sitting indefinitely, and quite often, even if you were to have charged them, they probably have already been incarcerated longer than they would have been permitted to under law.
Mark, again, with that hypothetical one that says this would actually make its way through Congress, wouldn't they have to see the inside of a courtroom?
Well, they can see the inside of a courtroom now, and this was ruled on by the Supreme Court during the Bush administration. They were given the right of habeas corpus to challenge the enemy combatant status. So there is access, and there are very nice questions about international law as to whether where the prisoner is incarcerated matters. But it doesn't really matter, in my view, if he's incarcerated in Guantanamo or not. It's a U.S. It's deeded to the U.S. for 99 years, and it's U.S. guards who are watching over him. So I don't think where he's physically located is determinative as long as U.S. officials are actually pulling the strings. And that would hold true, in my view, if he were rendered into Syria. It doesn't matter if the Syrians are doing the deed if they're being commandeered by U.S. officials. But in this case, they already have, under the Hamdi versus Rumsfeld decision, I think that's the one, from the Bush administration, the right, albeit a limited right, of habeas corpus. So I don't think it's a sea change, and I don't think there would be any legal impediment to moving them here. The question is, this is a whole lot of, mental masturbation, because it's not going to happen. Congress isn't going to let it happen. It's another one of Obama's grand symbolic gestures so that he can show
he campaigned on it.
Yeah,
he was elected.
Not only did he campaign on it, that was the first word out of his mouth in his inaugural address, so he wants to show that he's doing it before the end. Again, not to let that in a good way. The president who created this in the first place, he supported shutting it down. Right. Rumsfeld, who you recognized a moment ago that was in the suit, he thought it'd be open for 6 months, as the guest said. Nobody disagrees that this has been a recruitment tool for him. We can never define how many people were brought into Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or whatever else because of this presence. But from a math standpoint, well,
if
they
you shut it down...
This didn't bring them in to commit the 9/11 massacres, so they'll use anything as a recruitment tool. Anything in their hands can be a recruitment tool.
Fair enough, but just math, dollars and cents. If the thing was shut down and they were moved something else, basically the costs would, after about 3 to 5 years, you'd be on the positive side of the ledger of this.
Well, I got to invoke the president because that's above my pay grade. I don't know anything about that, but legally, I don't think there's any major impediment to bringing them over here. I don't think they're going to be entitled to any more process other than habeas corpus. It's the enemy combatant thing. Isn't that in and of itself? Listen, did it bother any of you guys that
this Geneva Conventions. I mean, we're signed on to
Absolutely.
this. And now all of a sudden we don't adhere to what we expect others to do.
And when Americans are held by North Korea, we expect them to be treated differently. We don't expect them to be.
We expect them to be tortured,
we don't,
because that's what they do.
No, we don't expect them to be detained indefinitely without charges. We lobby to get them back. And when you stop and think about it, Timothy McVeigh was held perfectly fine in an American prison in the United States.
An American citizen.
And, well, it's irrelevant. You're looking at the conduct, and the conduct was basically destroying the Murrah Federal Building and killing many individuals.
Is entitled to more process
and his
than a
terrorist
foreigner
act
who
was
attacks
no
this
different
country.
than the terrorist acts that were committed on September 11th, other than more people died. But the intent was absolutely the same, and we don't know all the other people who are still out there that are unindicted co-conspirators there. So we can certainly bring them to the same prisons and do it very effectively.
Well, here's the thing. I don't find any of these arguments compelling about that they're going to escape into the community or radicalize people, but they may well be more dangerous than the average bear in federal prison. And the experience downtown Manhattan at the MCC where guards, even in isolation, are viciously attacked with shivs and things like that by Muslim prisoners.
That happens
who are
all over
flinging
throughout the
feces at them,
American
etc.
prison system.
We have bad guys
You would
of
have
all
to,
different stripes.
you would have to, and it can be done. I don't have any doubt, as
I
Mayo
want to
said,
save
that
time
we
for the
can
next
hold them.
debate that I got into with the first guest, and that is Apple and the federal government here. FBI, as you know at home, they want to unlock the phone of one of the San Bernardino shooters. Apple says, no way, Jose, they won't give up the key. This one has wide-ranging implications.